You think you're great. Kung Fu Fighter. I will destroy you. Your garden variety Kung Fu is no match for me. Chinese boxing. I thought that art was dead. I used to love watching that stuff back in the day, man.
Yeah.
That was my life.
Yeah.
I thought people could actually fly. I thought Asian people could fly when I was like 7 years old.
Huge influence on Tarantino.
Yeah, right.
You can see it in his movies,
Those
too.
movies were awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Especially the Bruce Lee stuff.
Yeah. So, Jimmy D and the Wolf podcast. Here we are, another one. And the last one we talked about, we were finishing off talking about cuddling, which is a real service that you can hire. It's non-sexual. And I Googled it and looked at it, and I found, just in Nashville, this free commercial. You guys are going to have to pay me for this commercial. Cuddlist.com, Cuddle Buddy, Cuddle Comfort, and Snuggle Buddy. 4 different companies. I can't count. I guess I need some cuddling.
This isn't a jab towards any of those companies.
No, not at all.
But if you come to Madison, Indiana, there's a dog named Emma who will cuddle you on a level that you've never known before for like $100 an hour.
Anyway, yeah, we're all touch deprived in this society. We don't realize, and I was reading one of the blogs. I mean, they're very adamant about it, not letting it degrade into any kind of a sexual thing. But she talks about clients crying. She's got a hysteric client who is not supposed to touch any other people of the opposite sex, and he starts crying during the cuddle session. I mean, this is a serious thing. Touch deprivation in our society.
Huge. It's huge, especially young people, especially.
And it's apparently a raving business. I just think it to the point where how much it costs. I don't know what the charge is, but yeah. And this one woman was talking about it. Her average session is 90 minutes to 2 hours, and they either talk or don't talk. And it's just interesting.
It is, man, because 2 things. I mean, it makes you realize that like we are kind of, as a society and many other societies, we are deprived of that maybe most powerful basic human need, which is affection. And hugging is incredible for people's health and emotional well-being and mental well-being. You release dopamine when you hug somebody. And what's the other chemical that like babies I can't remember, but there's a chemical that when you hold a baby that they release. And, it says that, and it also points out how disconnected things really are right now. I wonder how many of those people have to do that for their own well-being, and how, a couple of things, like how frowned upon is that by many people in society.
Well, the one particular guy, the Hasidic Jew person, was afraid that anyone would see him going into her apartment because of their very strict rules about not being able to interact with women that aren't your wives.
Right.
So he specifically, because of his society group that he was in, was very much afraid of getting found out that he was going to this woman's apartment to get cuddled. A huge issue for him. Yeah,
and it points out an even bigger underlying problem, man. I mean, where are we at, really? If that's... everything can be purchased now?
Well, it started in Japan.
They're buying affection, you know what I mean? So everything's for sale?
Well, the Japanese started that. And the Japanese are great at... realizing and monetizing things. I mean, there are articles about, a generation ago, of course, I'm a great affection for Japan. I love Japan. I lived in Japan for 2 years. Once spoke Japanese fluently. It's fallen into disuse. And so absolutely, every time I talk about Japan, it's with great affection. wonderful long-term society with a lot of positive aspects. But one thing that a generation ago, it was quite common that multi-generational houses, they'd have like 2 or 3 story homes, and 3 generations would live, each generation would be on one story, and they would take care of their elderly. And they became Americanized, and people moved to the city from the rural towns, and they became in a hurry and climbing the ladder of whatever success, corporate success or whatever it would be. And now it is a huge epidemic of, I read an article that just made me cry, and to some extent in the U.S., but of interviewing elderly people that live, I mean, where they live, all the young people have moved out. Everybody moved to the city, and there's only people living in this apartment building are elderly people, and they're deathly afraid that they're going to die and be found in their apartment by people that work for the building, because nobody calls on them, nobody visits them, nobody calls them, even during holidays or birthdays. They've been abandoned.
I've seen it firsthand, man, and it's criminal.
Even apparently people that work in nursing homes say that there are people there that nobody comes to visit, which blows my mind.
Right, it's criminal.
You said you've seen it firsthand. What have you seen?
Well, it was that way, when my father got older, and then, of course, I've always had friends that were much older than me, and my dear friend Carol DeCamp, when he got older, he had a couple of friends that he was blessed to have, a couple of friends that would check up on him, but I see it every day, man.
Yeah, so it's not.
You
it's
can't
not
be
just
everywhere.
It's modern society,
right? It's modern society. People are throwing away not only the elderly, which have all this innate knowledge that needs to be handed down from generation to generation. That's being taken for granted now. That younger people don't necessarily look towards older people for the valuable resources that they are when it comes to knowledge and information. And we're also doing the same, I can't speak for Japan, but in the United States, we're doing the same thing with the mentally ill. They're being thrown away. They're being cast out. They're being thrown out without really any kind of help. They're out on an island just like a lot of elderly people are.
Yeah.
Society has thrown them away. When the society is doing as little as possible for the people that need them the most, what does that say about a society?
I'm right with you on that. Which kind of branching off of that, but somewhat related, but homeless people. I was reading an article, and this was a musician or producer, and doggone it, I'll look it up and I'll put it in the video of who this was. Sorry for you that listening on just podcast. Look for our videos on YouTube and Facebook. Jimmy D and the Wolf. Anyway, this musical person had a lot of success and created this organization that designed backpacks, because he was working with homeless people. And the one thing about homeless people, they would come to a place and they would get clothing or food or whatever it is, and they never had anything to carry it with. And he realized, and he had a focus group. He literally got a whole bunch of homeless people and had a focus group and said, what would you need in a backpack? And they designed the perfect backpack for the homeless person. And it's got airtight compartments where you can put, because they have everything, their birth certificate, their whatever it would be, their documents that we take for granted.
Sure.
And have storage, but
you can't get by without
you
them.
can't buy without it. Get by without it. And on the inside is I remember some of the details about it, is an waterproof compartment that is on the inside that'll keep all of that safe. And also another aspect was there's no zippers on the outside because they rust. I mean, this was for the long term, and these things are very robust, and they're giving them away to homeless people. And that is realizing that a lot of those people there's value there.
Sure.
Just because they're homeless doesn't mean that they have no worth as a human being.
Sure.
So I actually have thought about getting involved or donating or somehow being involved in this organization because it's a musician or producer. I'm gonna look that up and put that in the on the screen because that's a great work, overlooked work. What a way to contribute.
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
The homeless people that have that are just like, wow, I got all my belongings and I can carry them.
Sure.
I don't have to use a rusty old grocery cart with a busted wheel that won't go straight, or whatever. You see people pushing that, trying to have all their belongings. I mean, now there's a limit to how much you put in there, but it probably won't hold as much as a grocery cart would hold. But they seem to be pretty big backpacks, and and they also had the homeless people in the focus group said, why don't you put a rain poncho so that you can take it out and put it on and cover yourself when you get rained on. And there was something else that came from the focus group. So, I mean, this guy took it seriously. And he says, what do you need? What would be valuable? It's brilliant stuff.
That's amazing.
I love that.
Now, I saw on YouTube many years ago, I can't remember how many, and we'll have to figure out what this company is and add it to, because I don't remember the name. But I saw this beautiful YouTube video. This lady was trying to combat the homeless issue in her hometown, and I could be way off, but I want to say she was in Michigan maybe. And she was developing a jacket that could, I want to say the jacket turned into a tent or the jacket turned into a sleeping bag or something to that effect. But it was beautiful, the whole story, because she went to these homeless people in her community, it's much like this guy, and said, well, how could I improve on this design of this jacket that I'm making these jackets to give to you guys to help out? And the overlying message from the homeless community was, we don't want jackets, we want jobs. So this lady employed the homeless people. Yeah, it was incredible, man. And we'll have to figure out who it was.
That's awesome.
She employed the homeless people in the community, and I hope that it's still going. I don't know if it is or not. But she employed the homeless people to make these jackets at the factory. So it was like, we've discussed in business, the win-win-win model of the first win is you provide a good service. The second win is you make good money doing it. And the third win is you help humanity as a whole. And this lady had it just slam dunked, man.
It's amazing how life can turn against even the most successful people.
Sure.
There was a video a while back, and I'll put the details of this. Carlos Santana played with a percussionist. Do you remember this? On some of his early stuff. Might have even been at Woodstock with him, and hadn't seen this individual in 30, 40 years, and found him. I think he was homeless or near homeless, if not homeless, barely subsistence living. And there was apparently some performance royalties coming his way, or maybe he re-released an album. I'm going to have to look that up and find all that. And he found this guy, and there was a video of Carlos giving him,
his royalties,
and the guy's crying and the recognition from it. So at one point, if I remember it right, this guy was playing at Woodstock with Carlos Santana, and just fell on hard times. Things happen to people.
Oh, man, absolutely.
It could happen to any of us. Any one of us could become homeless.
Most people are either one tragic event or 3 or 4 paychecks away from being homeless, and most people have no idea. Most folks have to see it firsthand or know somebody and love somebody that experiences it before they understand how short that path really is. I had a brother that was homeless on and off for many, many years. And all of us like to believe that can't happen to us. And it's easy for us to look down our nose at homeless people. And it's easy for us to judge. And it's easy to look at them and say, drug addict, they're on drugs, And we do that, I think, subconsciously to tell ourselves that we're not all in it together. It's a protective mechanism. Most human beings will look at a homeless person, and instead of saying, well, that could be me, they'll say, well, probably a drug addict. they're probably strung out on drugs, which sometimes that happens. And, you know, my thing has always been, I don't always have enough money to give somebody if they're panhandling, but I have never not fed somebody that told me that they were hungry. And there have been a few times that you can tell which ones are drug addicts by the level of disappointment, the expression on their face when you hand them something to eat, because instead of giving them money, I'll give them something to eat. You know, and I did it more than once here in Nashville where it was somebody would say, hey, you know, you got change? I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'll be right back. Come back and hand him a cheeseburger, you know. And I had one guy who was obviously tweaked out of his mind on something that looked at me and was just like, I'm like, well, that's between you and God here, you know what I mean? At this point, this ain't on me, buddy. He said you were starving. I got you a cheeseburger. But, I mean, I don't know the answer, but I do know that a little more empathy from a lot of people would go a long way in viewing it for what it really is, that it really could happen to any of us.
Yes, I believe that.
Any of us. You know, what we're experiencing right now with my family and my wife's health and stuff and the job and everything. I'm so blessed that I have, you know, different ways to get by, but a lot of people don't have that, you know. I mean, a lot of people go to a factory job at 18 and that's all they know, and they work that job for 20 years or 30 years and a factory closes and there's nothing else they know how to do, and then all of a sudden they're 50 and they don't have an education and there's no other jobs there. Many of these people are vets, man. We can't take care of the people that are fighting our battles, you know. Criminal. It's criminal. The way that, and the lack of mental health care facilities and the channels that people with mental illness have to try to wade their way through to get any help, it's criminal.
It is.
The way elderly people are being treated in society, the way that homeless people are being treated in our society, and the way that mentally ill people are being treated in our society is nothing short of shameful.
Anyway, well, back to, the reason I went down the elderly aspect and then we got rabbit trailed out. In Japan, you can hire people to come and pretend to be your children visiting you.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, monetizing it. The cuddling, the same thing. You know,
if that wouldn't be the most, if you actually had children and had to hire somebody to come pretend to be one of your children, if that would not be the most heartbreaking moment of your life, I don't know what would be, man. My dad was rough. He really was. I'm not going to say my dad was a nice guy, but I was there for him at the end because he was my dad, you know what I mean? And the fact that people have parents that take care of them their whole life and still lose sight of that connection, I'll never relate to that. I'll never understand that.
Well, I don't know if we've ever had time in history of the world where that this disconnected from our ancestors.
It's unnatural.
It is unnatural.
It's completely unnatural. The old way was they stuck together, you know what I mean? You got the farm, and you took care of the old folks that took care of you, and your children saw that.
Well, and elderly wisdom was respected.
Exactly right.
And you touched on it earlier. There's no respect for that.
I told my son the other day. He said, it seems like most of your friends are older than you. And I told Memphis in the parking lot at school, I said, this might be the wisest thing I ever tell you. Always learn from older people, because the older they are, the more things they know, the more life they've lived, the more experiences they've had. And I was so blessed to have friends in my life. I mean, when I was 23 years old, my best friend in the world was an 85-year-old guy, Carol. And the things I learned from him were, you know, just... Which
one of your sons said that? Your son,
Memphis, the oldest.
I mean...
He's an old soul.
11 years old?
Yeah.
When I was 11, I didn't know my head from my butt. I mean...
Sure.
You know,
all my kids are way smarter than I was at that age. Way smarter.
They are. They both are. I've met them.
Way
both.
more intuitive. And, they're just with it. And sometimes they look at me a certain way sometimes, And I know what they're thinking of. Sometimes they're looking at me like, I think I'm smarter than him.
Well, see,
I know they do,
okay.
man.
Here's the thing. Back to why when you've got a new computer or phone and you can't figure out how to work it, and you ask your 5-year-old how to get this app, and it's intuitive to them, and they do it in 5 seconds. How many times can that happen before, as that 5-year-old, you begin to think
they think they're smarter than me?
Older people don't know anything. You
Right.
know? Why respect? There's no wisdom there to respect.
Right.
So who can blame them for that? I mean, and that's been going on for some time. I mean, where technology has been coming along and the older folks who didn't come up with it don't understand it. When we were just talking about personal computers first started in early 80s. IBM came out with the first, Osborne was the first personal computer in the late 70s, but the first commercially successful one was IBM in the early 80s, 81, I think. And we were talking about, can I go down this rabbit trail?
Sure.
We were talking about Bill Gates. According to Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, I remember which one exactly it was, where he talked about the 10,000 hours, which has now become a common
Bill
phrase
Gates,
people talk
Washington
about.
University.
Yeah, he was at Washington University, and he got his 10,000 hours in because they lived in a upper middle class community, and his mom was part of a mother's computing group, and when he was in junior high, had access on the weekends to the mainframe computer at the university there. And there was only like 3 places in the U.S. that was possible. That was very rare to have access to a mainframe.
Sure.
And he would go there and live there all weekend, from Friday night till Sunday night, and spend all this time in a mainframe. Nobody else had access to this. So by the time 10 years later, 1981, IBM is building this personal computer, and they need somebody to build the operating system. And somehow Bill got the contract and developed DOS. And he, according to the story, he said, okay, IBM, I'll sell it to you or I'll license it to you. And IBM said, we'll license it. If they had said, we'll buy it, we may not know the name Bill Gates.
Sure.
Because they licensed it. And every computer they sold, he got a piece of it. And personal computers became, the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah.
Back then it was mainframe, and there's no mainframe except for maybe big computing today, supercomputers. But now it's all laptops, desktops, and that was a foreign thing. And who could see that? Obviously, IBM couldn't, or they would have said, yeah, we're going to buy that.
Yeah, Bill Gates kind of had some foresight on that.
Well, did he, or did he get lucky?
Yeah, it's a lot of variables.
Why did he offer to them, you can buy it or license it? He said either way. He was good for it either way, based on what I've read. And they made the decision, let's license it. And that was the start of Microsoft. And now Bill Gates is, at one time, the richest man in the world. He's given away 75%, or has entitled people to get, he's doing great work in third world countries.
Yeah, he's a wonderful person.
Wonderful person. But he was the richest man in the world. Now it's Jeff Bezos, but he's way up there in the top 5. He's got way more money than he could ever spend.
Yeah, he can't spend.
In 100
he
lifetimes.
probably couldn't spend the interest on it if he could.
Yeah. He is so wealthy. He's worth like $200 billion or something like that. $100 billion at least. And
doing great things with it.
Doing great things.
That's beautiful.
He and his wife with their foundation. But that all goes back to the tip of the spear. If IBM had said, based on what I've read and understand, if IBM had said, yeah, we're going to buy that program from you, so we own it outright, we probably wouldn't know the name Bill Gates.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, man. The little things end up becoming the big things.
Yeah.
In life, those little variables.
And he wouldn't have been prepared to write that code and be in the position to be the guy that could do that if he hadn't have lived in Seattle, Washington.
Right.
And if the university hadn't have said, yeah, we're going to open up our university to the local public, non-college students. And if his mom hadn't been in this group of upper middle class mothers, and, had made a club. It was a club that their kids were in, and got him access to this, and he got obsessed with it, You know, I mean, if he hadn't, I mean, yeah, he had to do the work. I mean, having access and saying, yeah, maybe once a month I'll go down there and spend a couple hours. No, he became obsessed with it.
Right.
And utilized the opportunity. So he made it happen. But these things fell into place to allow him to get to that
Yeah,
point.
the opportunity.
He had the opportunity, and he made the most of it.
And I'm sure he's aware of that.
Yeah, he strikes me. I mean, he's not an arrogant. I mean, he doesn't seem to be a guy who's all about. I mean, look, who gives 75% of the money away? I mean, he's not about being arrogant based on his actions. He's very altruistic based on his actions. You can't fault him for that. So, yeah, it was just interesting how things happen. You get opportunities, you got to chase them down, but not everybody, not always. You know, you hear these, and then here's another interesting thing that came out in this book. It said that all of the big names who made it big in computers, and the guy with Oracle, Larry, can't remember his first name, and Bill Gates, and Apple, Steve Jobs, and all those names that built those big companies, they were all within 5 years of age of each other. So the way things worked out, if you were born later than that, you wouldn't have had those unique set of circumstances.
Right. It's the
If you were
perfect
born
storm.
earlier than that, you wouldn't have had those opportunities. All those guys that built those big companies were born within, if I remember the book correctly, within 5 years of each other. They're all about the same age. Larry, I can't remember the guy who started Oracle, which is another one of the hugest companies. Larry, I'll put it in the video.
In the right place, the right time, with the right resources.
Right. Now Bezos came later, but that's a different kind of technology. I mean, he wasn't doing computers; he was doing something different. I think Michael Dell might have even been in that same generation, Dell computer. So it's just interesting.
But thanks to these guys, now my kids think they're smarter than I am. And if you keep thinking that, kids, I'm going to throw the breaker on the power one day. And we're going to find out who knows what. Pull out the old school methods on them. I'm kidding.
All right. Have we covered enough stuff?
I think so, man. This has been a fun one.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed
sure
this.
All right.
Always a treat. Jimmy D, that's the wolf. Peace,
See you next time.
everybody.